Hey, all thanks to any overachievers who may be joining early. We're going to hang out for a couple minutes and we'll get started a little after 4 Eastern or wherever you may be calling it from. Thanks for joining today.
Eager overachievers, right?
Yeah, Melissa, this is giving me newfound appreciation for all those influencers out there who have to do all these live streams all the time. There's more that goes into it than I realized, but thanks to anyone who may have joined.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how they do it.
Great. To anyone who may have joined, we're just waiting a couple minutes here and then we'll get started, but thanks for joining us today. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour. We're just going to give folks a couple more minutes to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Just got to build the anticipation a little longer on these live streams. So thanks for being patient with us.
Josh, where are you coming in from today?
I am in New Orleans for the National College Attainment Network. So yeah, it's a good conference so far. This is my second year here, and it's good with a few of our network members who a number of folks supporting young people, particularly at the latter end of the cradle to career pipeline. So good work,
Good.
including a few spotlights on sporting rural students. So it's been good.
That's amazing. We'll have to wait and look for photographs, see if we spot you in any of the photographs.
Yeah. Well, I taught here in New Orleans for a couple of years, so it's good to be back in some familiar territory. Saw my old vice principal today. We were swapping our old stories, so it's good. But yeah, they had a guy
Good.
on stilts here yesterday, some show people. I think they did
Yeah.
a second line here yesterday, so it's good to get steeped back in New Orleans culture. Uh,
I did not know that about you. Every time that we talk, I learn something different about you.
I know now, yeah, normally we don't always talk on a social media platform. Normally it's just
I know. You're like a book of full of vignettes. It's like you just learn like something and just a little tidbit, like as we go along.
there you go. Yeah. Well, for anyone who's joining, start getting your questions ready because if not, the old math teacher in me is just going to start grilling Melissa with math problems. So save her from
Yeah, please. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that, Josh. So please,
It was
yeah, I'm
middle.
just
Let's see. I was high school and middle school, but I'll stick to the middle school. But I think we've given it a few minutes, so why don't we go ahead and get started? And just want to say welcome and thank you to anyone who's joining us here today. My name is Josh Pollack, and I'm a network advisor at StriveTogether. We're really excited to have you join and talk about the impact of place-based partnerships on rural Kentucky. I'll just share a little bit about StriveTogether to kick us off, and then no, we'll turn it over to Melissa and get started with some questions to learn more from your experience. But StriveTogether is a national network of community partnerships that brings together youth, families, nonprofits, businesses, schools, and other partners to really work toward a future where all youth can thrive in their communities. And so several of our Cradle to Career Network members are changing the way that their communities work by building connections, sharing resources, and using data to put more young people on a path to economic mobility. Our work really focuses on 7 cradle to career life milestones to ensure that all young people have opportunities they need to reach their goals and to ultimately thrive. And as a network advisor at StriveTogether, I'm lucky enough to work with our place-based partnerships who are working to transform systems and put more young people on a path to economic mobility. And I work with our communities to provide strategic guidance, connections to tools, data, and peer learning opportunities to strengthen network member capacity, facilitate collaboration and connection across sectors, and to help support our network members advance strategies that enable young people to thrive. And one of the organizations that I'm really grateful to get a chance to work with is the Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership. And we're lucky to have them join us today to share more about the impact of their work in southeastern Kentucky. And so I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Melissa Newman, who serves as the executive director of the Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership, who can share with us more about the successes, challenges, and some of the insights they have from having forged partnerships in a rural area. And so, Melissa, just want to say thank you for joining us today, and would love to turn it over to you to introduce yourself before we dive into some more of the conversation.
Yes. And Josh also serves as my network advisor. So we meet frequently. And I feel like that I always start our conversations with, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened. Now, that could be a good thing or that could be a bad thing. But I'm always telling him about something that's going on in the partnership. Sometimes it's exciting news. Sometimes it's it's a knot that I need to untangle. But either way, Josh is there for me and for my entire team. So
Sometimes it's also our grandkid story, your grandkid stories or my kid stories. So I appreciate your advice for me there too, with 2 little
That
ones.
that's true. It is kind of that, asymmetrical kind of a symbiotic thing there. But yes, I am the the executive director of the Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership. And just as Josh described, as StriveTogether, all of the other C2Cs across the nation, we we convene multi-sector partners to share things. And it's amazing that when we share things like resources, even staffing in some cases, knowledge, expertise, and even money, how much more we can get done for our rural kids.
Thanks, Melissa. And I just wanted to start, all of our work in probably no matter what kind of work you're in, but especially this work really begins with people and begins with trust. And we often talk. I'm reminded I'm sitting here in New Orleans where I was a teacher, and so and sitting with a lot of the experiences of my students and their experience that have shaped me and the person I am that bring me to this work. And would love to just start by understanding, as we think about people in their role who serve and work to transform systems. We'd love to start with you as the person in this work and to give you a
Yeah.
chance to share a little bit about what brings you to this work, helping lead Appalachian C2C.
Well, thanks, Josh. I don't often talk about, my past and how the journey of how I got to this work because I'm much more interested in how other people got into this work and what their needs are. But I will say this, that, I'm from Eastern Kentucky, specifically Knox County, Kentucky, which doesn't mean anything to anybody outside of Kentucky. But I am a first generation college graduate and grew up in generational poverty, generational domestic violence, um, and saw opportunities in other people. And so I think back to all of those adults in my life that helped me get to where I am now. And I didn't do this alone. And so when I think about that and what brings me into this work is the fact that I want to know what people's stories are. I want to know because I want to know what their barriers are. And my first career was as a journalist. And so even beyond what I'm doing right now, I'm always thinking about what are the stories because the stories are our data, and you find out the things about what are people facing, what are their barriers. I'd like to envision the cradle to career work as a massive pipeline. And our job is to make sure that it has fewer cracks and holes where our young people can fall out and have to get back on track because that's much harder. And so when I think about my own journey, I want to make sure that we are creating organizations, supporting organizations, and creating opportunities for the people who work in those organizations to be that trusted adult, that adult that shows these young people a different path to success.
Thanks, Melissa. And what do you remember the moment you kind of got exposed to cradle to career partnerships or this kind of work and kind of how you switched in from journalism into this role?
Yes, well, in journalism, I was a reporter, then a section editor, publisher, and once you reach a certain level, you become responsible for money, right? You become responsible for making money and making things run. From there, it wasn't a big leap from doing that to fundraising. So I started fundraising for my alma mater, Union College, which is Union University now in Barberville, Kentucky. But I'm sorry, it's Union Commonwealth University. They just changed the name. And so I started raising money for my alma mater. Now, within that, I also started to realize that when you start to raise money at the college level, you uncover a lot of barriers that college students have. And some of those things are an impacted wisdom tooth that, has them missing school for 3 weeks or for 2 weeks, or they don't have dental insurance. It could be that they become homeless because their family, they got in an argument with their family and they become homeless. And so I started to raise money for a lot of these barriers that were hidden that the students didn't want to talk about because it was embarrassing. And so I want to say that I really started my cradle to career work at that point because some of these young people had children and they didn't have childcare. Some of these young people had insurmountable barriers, like, for example, taking care of a sick or elderly parent or grandparent. And so I want to say that my cradle to career work really started there. And from there, I stayed in the university college system and continued to raise funds. And that is how I came across Partners for Education, which is what Partners for Rural Impact used to be. And because I was discovering all of these barriers, of course, an organization like Partners for Rural Impact, that is exactly what they do. So our work just became closer and closer and closer as time went on. And at one point, the president of the university where I was working, he said, "Are you working for them or are you working for us?" And I took that as a compliment because we were doing so much good work together to make sure that the young college students who had these barriers were able to complete their journey to graduation.
That's great. Well, we could spend a full hour talking more about your background and your journalism background. I get some snippets during our monthly meetings, and so always appreciate learning more and getting to share that with folks. But thanks for sharing more about your journey. And I should name before I have a few more questions for us, but should just name for anyone who's joined, please submit on whatever platform you're on. Please submit your questions for Melissa. We'd love to hear from you, and so we'll move on to your questions as soon as we get more of those. But I'll keep us going here for a little bit. And we just love to transition. You're such a staunch advocate, Melissa, for this work in rural communities, and would love to just get your sense of kind of what you see as the distinct challenges and opportunities about engaging in place-based work in rural communities.
So in rural communities, we have unfortunately become accustomed to being an extraction, a place of extraction. So in Eastern Kentucky, at first, it's environmental extraction. So they're extracting our resources. And, The only people who got rich in Eastern Kentucky from coal were the coal companies, right? It wasn't the people who were working in the coal. So, extraction of our work, of our labor source. And then, the extraction of our economic resources, our human resources. But now it feels like we have an extraction of intellectual resources where we try out things, we do things, and then we perfect things that work in rural communities, and then those things are taken other places. And unfortunately, we've gotten used to that. We've gotten used to being the place of extraction. And so that's a barrier that I see. And it's also cultural. Part of the work that I do in my doctorate, in my research agenda through my doctorate program, is that raising hope is a big factor in economic development. And when I started doing this research in 2017, it was revealed that economists are now starting to look at higher levels of hope are related to higher economic conditions. And we used to think that if we tackle problems like bring more jobs, bring more resources, and bring more economic development to these areas, then people will have higher hope. When in fact, both things can be true at the same time. When people have higher hope, they will fix their own economy, they will fix their own situation. And so, one of the things that I think is really important for us to think about when we think about barriers is that narrative. Our narrative in Kentucky's Appalachia has been used to perpetuate a stereotype that we are not as smart as everybody else, that we're not as innovative as everybody else, that, we're not entrepreneurial, and those kinds of things. But whenever we start to believe the other things, then those things become true, that we are, entrepreneurial, and we can fix our own situation. And so one of the things that I'm really thinking about within Cradle to Career is civic engagement, because civic engagement allows us to be a community where whenever we do have a problem, we know how to go to the city council. We know how to go to, in Kentucky, we call it the fiscal court, which is our county government. And we know how to fix things and how to do things for ourselves, which raises the empowerment of the community and the agency for people to feel like that they can actually do something about their situation. So when I think about what's different in rural communities, it is that cultural piece that the outside world believes about us, that negative stereotype, the negative narrative that people believe about us, and that often we believe it about ourselves. And so when we start to turn that around, and we do that through the Cradle to Career work, because we're empowering these young people to have agency over their own conditions and over their own lives. And to me, that is huge. And it wraps all the way around the pipeline, that civic piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to turn to some of the ways you are building that hope and that inspiration and truly that empowerment through that work. And so just I'll just name it. Strive Together. We hold that the goal of putting 4 million more young people on a path to economic mobility, and leveraging the kind of four core pillars that we think about of a place-based approach, which is the shared community vision, leveraging evidence-based decision making and strategies, enabling collaborative action, and ensuring the sustainability of the work, both from a financial and operational standpoint. And so you were talking about kind of the ways in which you all from at the Cradle to Career Partnership are really instilling hope. And we would love to get a sense of how you bring those pillars to life in your community and with partners to enact that.
Yeah, it's amazing to see our partners work together because, and I talk about this quite often with you and with other people. The Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership is not its own 501c3. We live under Partners for Rural Impact, and we have a backbone that serves our partnership. None of my staff members, there are 6 of us, none of us work for PRI. We are always working for partners. So like, for example, today I was in Frankfurt with 3 different partners, meeting with the Department for Local Government to move policy to help my partners get something done. And when you think about that, when you can take away the need to support one's own self and put that back onto how you support your partners individually and collectively, we come together and we do amazing things. We move policy, we write grants together, we get different types of funding together, we share staff members in a lot of cases. And so I get really excited talking about this because prior to this work in Cradle to Career, when I was working as a journalist, when I was working in higher education and doing those things, this was not the norm. This was not the norm. We weren't sharing things. We had duplicative efforts. In a lot of places, we had big, huge gaping holes in what we would now consider to be this pipeline, that now we have partners, but then those partners also have partners. So I can guarantee you that anywhere in Eastern Kentucky, if you name an organization or you name something that someone is doing that is good, they are somehow either directly or indirectly related to the Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership. And so it's through that our students and our young people and our families, they have no direct realization of why things are changing and why things feel a little easier, but they are. So I get excited talking about the partnership because I do believe that we have become, since we joined the Strive Together network and we have all of the supports, and also just being there with for each other through all of these disasters, COVID, flooding, tornadoes, that we now are able to pick up a phone, text somebody, and get the thing that we need almost immediately when we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you let me join y'all when there was some of the recent devastating flooding just to see, I know you all are also always thinking about the long term, but just how you've built those relationships in a way that allows you to mobilize in the immediate term. We kind of talk about this term civic infrastructure, about how work happens in community, and just seeing that real time as you all mobilize partners was incredibly impressive. And for me, just really brought home like, what do we actually mean when we mean civic infrastructure? It's those relationships, a way that you all are able to move partners. Um, but I love the idea that kind of anywhere in the state or anywhere in southeastern Kentucky, it's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or 6 degrees of Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership. I don't know. We can play that game.
Mhm.
But would love just you talked about kind of the importance of the partnership, and would love to give folks a sense of the specific strategies you all are mobilizing partners around to move the
Mhm.
needle for kids and families. So can you share some of those specific strategies that the
Yeah.
partnership has been working to advance work in rural Kentucky, um, and
Mhm.
how the partnership changes the way those strategies are actually put into action?
Yes, absolutely. So, we have huge barriers. We're trying to reach those outcomes, the outcomes that you mentioned early on in this conversation. All of those outcomes are front and center for us. But we also know that there are all kinds of other things that affect those outcomes, like youth mental health, early childhood. We like all rural places in America, we have a childcare desert. And, in addition to that, we have the chronic absenteeism piece where, during the pandemic, kids went home and a lot of them just didn't come back. And we have a culture now where kids just aren't coming to school. And we have to fix that because if kids aren't in school, they can't learn. So we have all of these big rocks to move. And in order for us to do that, those things can't exist in the entire big pipeline of the partnership because we need to focus on those outcomes, right? So what we do is we take a strategy, we come up with we don't come up with a barrier. A barrier reveals itself to us. And if we have the right partners at the table, we will take that and we will move it over to a strategy working group. We have a staff member, Rosie Stafford, who is excellent at convening these strategy working groups around very specific things that are affecting our pipeline. So, for example, huge ones that we haven't started to move yet are those things around domestic violence. We have a culture of domestic violence. We're number 2 in the nation right now, only switched back and forth from Oklahoma. It's Oklahoma, Kentucky, periodically. And so looking at some of those huge issues where we can involve our law enforcement community, our legal community, and those things, we still haven't done that yet. But we are doing things like the youth mental health piece, which also affects chronic absenteeism, which also affects all of those outcomes in the pipeline that you mentioned. And so that's one of the ways that we do this. And when we pull a strategy working group together from the larger multi-sector partnership, what tends to happen is that we have other people who come into that work too. So it can be parents, it can be grandparents, it can be business community, it can be the faith-based community that come around a problem. And within that strategy working group, we start to reveal funding. We start to reveal other resources. We talked about the resources that we all have together in the multi-sector partnership of the App C2C. But then when you take a strategy group and you move it to the side and you intensely work on it, you discover that you have resources over there too.
Got it. Okay. And I know we have some questions coming in, so we'll transition over there in a second. But just would love to get a sense. We talk about the partnership, and you all we've referred to Appalachian Cradle to Career as the backbone organization that's doing the work for the backbone, on behalf of the broader partnership. And would love to get a sense of how you think about the sustainability of the partnership and building the capacity and supporting not just the work, but actually the organizations that are part of the partnership. How do you think about kind of elevating, supporting their work and capacity to do this, given that, as you mentioned, you're a small, mighty team as the backbone, but really working to coordinate, convene, and help support all the broader partners?
Yeah, I love to talk about this because it was one of those things where I started out thinking about it one way and now I think about it a totally different way. And that is, I mentioned earlier that the App C2C is not its own 501(c)(3). So I used to think, oh my gosh, we can't take in large sums of money. I can't go raise money and bring it to the App C2C because PRI is our parent organization. And I used to look at that as such a barrier. But when we started working around that, and I realized that I don't have to bring money for me and my team because we have PRI and we have other resources, my role really has to be bringing those funding resources, whether it be private, public, whether it's moving policy. Like this morning meeting with the Department for Local Government, the commissioner, no matter what it is, if I bring that to a partner, then it strengthens that partner. And while right now the App C2C backbone staff lives under PRI, I envision that we are so strong, our multi-sector partners are so strong individually that each one of our staff members, including me, might live with one of those partners, but we are there to support the whole. And so when I think about sustainability long term, that's the way that I look at it, is that we have each partner where it makes sense supporting a piece of this backbone, where then we are convening together in the same way. We're just kind of living somewhere else. So that's the way I see sustainability going forward.
Okay. And just to, I think about, I also want to give you a chance to brag about your funding work that you're doing statewide to support financial sustainability for partners. But is there an example you can point to of kind of work that has happened in the community that wouldn't have happened but for the Cradle to Career partnership and that kind of coordination, just to show, kind of demonstrate tangibly like how this work plays out in practice, kind of what's happening that wouldn't have happened without y'all?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot. I would say definitely the work that we're doing around youth mental health was splintered and siloed. And now that we're all together, we're bringing different types of resources around that, which of course play into like what we talked about, um, the chronic absenteeism piece. And so helping that. But I would also say, the way that we raise money together is really, to me, still fascinating, even though I'm a part of it. Because just like, for example, today, we go to Frankfurt, we're coming home in the car. By the time that we get from Frankfurt to Richmond, which is, like maybe an hour, we already have we've been making phone calls, we've been sending texts, we've been reaching out to people. We already have the plan in place and the partners in place to apply for a federal grant that we all want and that we all need to attack certain pieces of the pipeline. Now, prior to the C2C, that would not have happened. We would have had to have reached out to these partners individually, educate them on what we're doing, the what, the how, the why, and then ask them if they want to be a part of it. And because we are so close and we work so closely together and we understand all of the outcomes, there is no education. There's no education that needs to be done around what we're doing. It's just this, it's just simply, you know, what are you doing? It really is, what are you doing? What do you need from us? And that, I think, speaks volumes for our partnership.
Got it. Thank you, Melissa. And I'm gonna pivot to a question that came in, and please, for those that join, please keep submitting your questions. But Avery asked, "What do you think are the conditions necessary to achieve in rural areas that will keep young people in the region? And how are you at PRI and Appalachian C2C working to make those conditions a reality?"
I think that young people don't realize the opportunities that exist in their rural place already. So, and they also don't realize the training that you need to get there. So, for example, let's say I want to be a public relations person. I don't have to go work at a PR firm in Lexington. There are lots of organizations where I can plug in and work in public relations, in any other profession like that. So while we have partners like Shaping Our Appalachian Region and Mountain Association, and I hope I don't leave anybody out, but while they are working on economic development, like increasing the rate of, our economic development, our economic status in the region, it is our job in what we're doing to make sure that these young people recognize these opportunities that are being brought to them and that we are helping those young people meet the moment through trainings and through internships, because we know anecdotally and empirically that if a young person has an internship that is part of their career pathway, they are going to enter the org chart of any organization higher than they would have otherwise. And so then that has the economic factor where they're going to enter that org chart higher than they would have. They're going to make more money. That money is going to feed back into the economy. So I see us as directly, while we have partners who are working on economic development and industry and business and those kinds of things, that we are meeting them where they are, and making sure that those families and those young people know about these opportunities and are trained for these opportunities. That work excites me a great deal because that keeps young people in the region. They start to see opportunity, Avery. They start to see that they can make a difference and that they can build something that's entrepreneurial, that's innovative, or they can plug into something that someone else is doing. So I think that that's how we do it. And, as we know, the world is changing. We have a partner who places interns who are from deep East Kentucky, like Martin County, Lawrence County, in jobs with Procter and Gamble in Cincinnati, and that young person's first job is with P&G in Cincinnati. And so that in and of itself allows us to show young people that you can stay in your community, you can keep your familiar surroundings if that's what you want to do, and you can have those family supports while still having that big city job.
Yeah, I know that work's just taken off now, the kind of paid internship work. Is there any more on the paid internship strategy that y'all are moving forward you want to share, or
Yeah.
the kind of what the next phase of that you think is going to look like?
So one of the nuts that we had to crack, so to speak, was that a lot of our businesses want to. Let me go back. So there was a point where I think that us and in all places were doing a real disservice to business and industry and our young people around internships. It was, okay, we have 20 internships open, we have 20 businesses. Let's set them out into the world. It doesn't matter if it's a match. But now being more intentional about that and placing these students with these businesses where they're really going to be interested in that job and that career trajectory, and also vice versa, so that the business and industry is increasingly interested in incubating or making sure that these young people have the training that they need to come up should they need to be hired um, at that particular business or organization. So I think being very intentional about it is exciting. But one of the things that we had a hard time with was because we had done a real disservice, we're having to reteach our business community about the value of internships. It's not something that you're doing as a favor to this young person. This is a symbiotic relationship that can be as beneficial to the business as it is to the youth. And so we're having to re-educate them. So in that lies a situation where they don't see the value of the investment right now. So we are raising money and we are placing those interns. We're even taking the responsibility of the employer, being the employer of record, off of the plate of the employer. So, for example, we have a third party vendor who is, we give them the money. The intern actually works for them, not the employer, but they are placed at the place of, where their placement is. And so, as we're doing that, we're going to begin to step more into, well, maybe next time you take an intern, you can pay for 10% of this. Maybe the next time, maybe it's 20%. And reevaluating how we treat internships and again, changing the culture around that. The other thing is that we also know empirically and, anecdotally, that there are a lot of barriers when young people try to do an internship because a lot of times it's in the summer. So there's a transportation issue. We have huge transportation barriers in Eastern Kentucky. There's the other barriers of, I don't have a suit. I don't have what I need to go to work. And so we started this fund through one of our community foundations, actually through two of our community foundations, where students who are in an internship have access to funding that they need to help them get through that internship. So it can be a gas card. It can be, remember, I talked about the impacted wisdom tooth way earlier in the conversation. If you need a tooth pulled, whatever you need, we want to make sure that you have your needs fulfilled so that you can be more successful at that internship. So yes, that is the work that we're doing right now. It is exploding. It's exponential, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, I love that. I'm sure, yeah, as more employers here, hey, this isn't charity. This is helping make sure we get young people. We're getting, folks that are really helping move the needle. They're coming in prepared. They're coming in with the resources they need so that really they're adding value early on. That's huge. And so it struck me as you were talking about the way that the partnership can bring those perspectives that maybe someone in one sector might not see, right? Like, they might need the wraparound supports, whether it's transportation or even clothing or other emergency supports. Can you talk about how you and partners really elevate youth and families to help inform the strategies? I know we're going to share later some of the resources and the case study that StriveTogether did on Appalachian C2C, including sharing some of the stories of young people. But can you share kind of how that perspective feeds into your work?
Yes. So we have youth and families that serve on our strategy working groups when we're trying to attack a big problem so that we do have their perspectives. We also have, I will call them young adults, like somebody who has, gone through the whole pipeline and they've made it without all of the supports that we're offering now. And so they can offer a really good perspective into, oh my gosh, if I only had, one of these things, or if I only had support in transportation or support in, buying books for college, whatever it was, they bring a really unique perspective because they've been through all that. And now they are in the professional workplace with people who did not have those barriers. And they're starting to see how this plays out in adulthood, whether it be confidence, imposter syndrome, whatever it is, they have brought that whole journey that they have taken from cradle into career, and they can now come back and help us to think about how we fix some of those things before they get to that point.
That's great. Okay. I want to build from that with the idea of storytelling and one of the questions that came in, and I'm gonna prepare the audience. You ask Melissa about journalism, you're gonna hear about it. So one of the questions that came in was about um, given your background and experience in local journalism, and I know you're in national conversations about this, how you see the role of local journalism in the development of civic infrastructure and how you see that in the work of improving cradle to career outcomes.
Yeah. So when I think about how news and information and civic engagement affect the pipeline, to me, it is as integral as water, housing, broadband. Because when we're making decisions about water, broadband, and housing, we're making those decisions on the news and information that we see. In this world, human beings were never meant to know every single day what was happening on the other side of the ocean. What we were meant to know is what's going on in our communities, because that's something that we have agency. We can do something about it here, now, today. And if all of us are working in our communities in that way and we're civically engaged, we are, running for public office, or at least, talking to people who are running for public office, and we're paying attention to what's going on in all of our local communities, then the whole entire landscape becomes a better, more informed, better informed place upon which we are making decisions when we go behind that voting booth, or whenever we are talking in front of people about what's important to us and what we need. Um, and so when I think about that, our young people need to be in a place where we can reframe what it means to be an activist in your community, um, what it means to take up causes and bring it to local and state government. And if you think about that, in my opinion, every state in the United States should be purple. They should not be red. They should not be blue. And to me, that would scream that we are all thinking for ourselves, that we are all so well informed that we are following issues and not people. So yeah, you asked for it, whoever asked that question. So I was like, but I do believe that every young person needs to know what is good news and information, what is unbiased news and information, and how can I weed through all of this stuff. And then also we go back to the story every single day, no matter what job we have, whether I'm working in an accountant's office or I'm working in a local newspaper or a local television station. We are perpetuating our story so that others can see us and hear us. And so it's important for people to know how to tell the world about who we are. So I think journalism education is very important for that reason. I think all of us should know how to be good journalists so that we can know how to discern good journalism.
Hmm. Appreciate that. Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, Colin, for the question. I'm also just continue to be come back to where you started this conversation with hope and just the impact of journalism and local news and spreading stories of hope. Again, kind of showing, not just telling, the power and
Mhm.
impact. I remember the news story that came out. I think you shared it a few months ago, right, on how high schoolers are locally supporting early literacy efforts and actually serving as models in the community, reading stories to young kids. And you kind of get
Mhm.
that full circle of civic engagement in which young people who have been impacted by the system are also supporting young people just entering early on in K-12. So thank you for continuing to push us on that and elevate that. I want to give you a chance to brag for a second. And would love to get a sense, there's so much work. Again, the small, mighty team at Appalachian C2C is driving work in the region and the state. Would love, and we always at Strive Together are trying to do our best to kind of elevate lessons in the field of where there's things that are working or that others can learn from. We love, again, just give you a chance to brag for a sec. What are some of the wins that you think you've experienced as of late as a partnership that we might elevate for other folks to learn from?
Yeah, so this is a huge win for us, even though we haven't won yet. It is a multi-state partnership where in Kentucky, the App C2C partnership was talking about and implementing a grants consortium. So what this means is that we want to bring together a lot of organizations who can support smaller organizations in getting investment, whether that be public, private, or whether it be earned revenue streams. So we're working on that. And while we're on our way to working on that and getting that big thing funded, we run into a number of other states in the Appalachian Regional Commission um, service area that are also having this same type of thinking. And so we partnered up with these other states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky, of course, us. And we wrote a proposal that would support a grants consortium in each one of those states. And part of what the reason I say we haven't won yet is because, there was a huge drop in funding for ARC. And at that point, we were told we don't have the money to fund this. And the reason I say we haven't won yet is because it was announced today that the Arise grant, which is the one that we applied for, is open again. So
Oh,
we have higher hope now on that. And that was part of the conversation that we had today with the commissioner at the Department for Local Government. So those are moving along. We haven't won yet. But the other thing that is really interesting about this is that, in rural America, only 7% of philanthropic investment goes to us. The rest of it goes everywhere else. And
hmm.
so when we think about that, what do we need? So we developed a framework and we're supporting our community college or our community college system in with the Strive Together investment. We are investing in them to develop a curriculum for grant writers. So we're teaching grant writing now at the community college system. And in addition to that, we're helping to fund the adjunct professors needed to help it get its legs under it. We only have in the state of Kentucky 14 grant professional certified individuals. And one of those lives on our team, and two of those lives in our partnership. So we have, I feel like, almost the lion's share of those folks. And then we have another one that actually works at PRI. So that's four. So the other 10 are somewhere else. I mean, how lucky are we? But how many of those people can we educate and train so that they too can help to bring investment? The other piece of this is immediately when we receive grant applications that folks need help with, um, we immediately want to flip those into private proposals and go out and look for private funding for that too. So no longer are we in a situation where we don't have the diversification of investment that we need. And so working toward that has been really enlightening and fulfilling. And I know that it's going to work. And then the third part of that, the looking looking within ourselves, all of our multi-sector partners are starting to look within themselves to see what expertise do we have that we can monetize. How can we pay for a position by monetizing some expertise that we have that the rest of the country or the rest of the world needs to know about or needs to hear about? So working on that has been really fulfilling, and it is going to work, and we're all really excited about it. So that's one thing that we haven't won yet, but we are winning even just by trying. Um, so yeah, and especially the education piece of this, where we are training people to inject as much investment as possible into Eastern Kentucky. I think that that's a phenomenal approach to this.
Yeah, I love you. You always hold such a strong lens for really thinking about the capacity of partners, not just the backbone team, but really spreading that love and institutionalizing it. And to that end, we talk about systems change, right? Which can sound really nebulous,
Mhm.
um, and sound like jargon. But I'm wondering if there's other examples, whether it's through policy or
Mhm.
other examples you might be able to point to of kind of how you see systems change playing out? What are the ways that this work has become institutionalized in the way partners go about their work, or how strategies are embedded to actually enable outcomes change for kids and families?
Yeah. So one of the things is, um, we're going to ask, we're very loud. So the App C2C partnership, we're very loud. And when we stomp our feet, it shakes the ground. Okay. And so we have one of our partners, Grant Ready Kentucky, who, a couple of years ago came in with House Bill 9, which now has translated into House Bill 723. And what this does is, one of the barriers to us having investment injected into our region is that it usually requires match dollars. And some of our smaller organizations, some of our, school districts, we just don't have the match dollars because sometimes it's an 80-20, sometimes it's a 70-30 split. We just don't have it. So Grant, House Bill 723, has set aside in the state budget a large sum of money that if you meet all the criteria and you fill out all the paperwork, because we all know that that works, that we can access that money for our match. And that is a game changer for us. We've already been able to use it. We've already helped other smaller and mid-sized nonprofits be able to access this money and use it. And so part of the work that our backbone does, we have, a data manager, we have a grants manager, we have a communication and public relations person, we have also program coordinator, and we have partnership director that their job is to lead people to these opportunities that we know exist and that can help them get the investment that they need. And I know that I talk an awful lot about investment, but it is really that piece that I think that we're lacking, that we, all of us in the backbone, and we wake up every single day thinking about how our partners become more sustainable for the future so that we all become more sustainable as a partnership. And I had somebody say, it's like, all you talk about is money. Well, money moves things. Money moves things, but also, that big footprint that, when we stomp our feet and it shakes the ground, that's the kind of partnership and policy that you have to have um, if you're going to be successful in bringing resources and sustainability through investment into your community.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it earlier, right? But the money can equal people power, it can equal the
Yeah,
resources. It's not just dollars for dollars sake, but really
yeah,
what funding can unlock in
yeah.
communities, especially where you may need people on the ground across a wide geographic footprint. And so yeah, I had a leader once tell me, show me your budget and I'll show you your values. So I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Thanks for shaking the ground for us, Melissa. I do want to raise one question that Eileen shared with us from socials, which was around this idea of really how the partnership thinks about uh, meeting the greatest need. And it came up in the question is really thinking about paid internships in particular, which the question was raised kind of, often those opportunities can go to where parents are connected or can kind of go to who may already be well set up for those opportunities. So how do you see the partnership really thinking about how to get internships and other opportunities to students who need them the most?
Well, in our school districts, because we have in the App C2C in the Promise Zone plus Knott County region in the 9-county area, we have our school districts at our table. And so our school districts know the students who have need. And Eileen, I know exactly what you're talking about. I have lived that where all of the opportunities go to those well-connected families and those well-connected students. And, one of the things that I like to say, and I coined this early on when I came to work for PRI, is that in order to disrupt generational poverty, you have to disrupt generational privilege. And, when you say that to someone, they're like, oh, yeah, yeah. But then when their kid doesn't get that internship, then that's a problem, right? So we are in the school districts. Everyone should have the same opportunities in those schools. One of the things that I am really proud of is that we have a scholarship program within our partnership, Thompson Scholars. And when you think about scholarship programs, academic scholarship programs, those go to the best and brightest. And let's just face it, most of the time, the best and brightest kids are those kids of, people who are well connected in the community because they have the better chance at getting at those resources. But at Thompson Scholars, they are serving kids who live in public housing. That is their service area. And so those students come to after school programs. And so when those students participate in programs, they earn money every time they come to something. And we support that too. The App C2C and all of our partners support that. That those are children, those are young people that wouldn't often have these kinds of opportunities. So while I can't say that we are 100% serving all of those students who need it the most, we are trying awfully hard. And I used to serve on a board for a food pantry. And I will say this, there was a woman who worked there, and people were coming in and they were complaining about people picking up food who didn't really need it. And, they knew that they, had a new house, or somebody knew that they had a new car, or, got their nails done, some kind of craziness like that. And she said this, and I will never forget it. And I don't want you to forget it either, that sometimes you have to go through the greedy to get to the needy.
Love it. Um, I love that. Well, I know we're starting to come up on the top of the hour, and so just want to give you an opportunity. You've had such a plethora of experiences. You've seen this work play out in different communities, parts of the state. Would love to get a sense of kind of what you see, what advice you have for leaders and organizations that are working to implement place-based approaches in rural communities.
Listen, this is my advice all day, every day, and it happened to us by accident. When I described that we don't have a mechanism for taking money in to support our backbone. So what we do is when we get opportunities for funding and resources, we look down our bench, we talk with our partners, and we push that money to where it fits the best. So even if you are in a situation where you don't have that and you could take that money for yourself, I would suggest to you to not do that. Find the partner that can help check a lot of boxes for you and your partners, and help that partner become more sustainable. Because within that, you develop a partnership that is not going to crumble during bad times. A partnership that, we're not all perfect. When we have arguments and disagreements and things like that, it doesn't mean that we're breaking up forever. It just means that we're mad in the moment. And people do come back because they see you as not being that organization that is just going to suck up all of the resources and all of the things. And so that's my suggestion, is to approach it from that standpoint. And, for a lot of us who, for people who have big egos, that's hard. That's hard to be able to get a thing and not keep it, but just to spread it around for the greater good. But I can promise you right now, it's a better feeling. It strengthens your partnership more, and people will, and I've said this before, I think I said it on stage in Tulsa when I was talking about this, Josh.
Yeah.
I really do believe that our partners, we would all just ride right straight into hell with each other.
Well, I've learned so much from you, and one other piece that I'll just build from what you said is you make your voice heard in different forms, whether it was when we were in Tulsa together or in our you've pushed my thinking, you've pushed the network's thinking, really thinking about again those, and not to paint all of rural communities with a broad brush, but how this work can happen in rural communities and how we at Strive Together can be a better partner to our networks that are working in rural communities. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for sharing your perspective here today and your leadership journey in this work. And also just want to thank everyone who joined us here today to learn more about the impact of place-based work on rural Kentucky and the work of Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership. We are going to share a few resources in the chat. We actually team from StriveTogether was lucky enough recently to go down to the region and have published two features about the impact of Appalachian Cradle to Career Partnership. There's a video case study that details their work towards a future where all rural students succeed. And then there's also a blog post that is spotlighting the specific story. We talked about storytelling today. So there's a blog post that highlights the story of one student in particular. And so we're going to share those links in the chat. If you'd like to learn more, you can also go to the StriveTogether website and follow along with the Cradle to Career Network. And then we're also going to share resources related to the Training Hub from StriveTogether, which is a really great resource. It's free to anyone, whether you're part of the network or not, and it provides easy access, high quality training to think about how to apply proven approaches tested by leaders across the country. And so these courses are really designed to support leadership and partnership capabilities to work across sectors and change systems and improve outcomes for youth. And so we'll share that link to register and learn in the chat. And again, Melissa, I just want to thank you and thank everyone who joined us on this live adventure we just went on, which is one of the first we've done. So thanks for helping test this out and sharing more about your story and your work.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you and I appreciate StriveTogether and the investment that you've made in our partnership has really it has changed everything.
Well, thanks. So I'm excited to see you soon. I get to be in space with you. So I'm lucky. I don't just get to connect with you through the interweb, so I'll get to see you in a week. But I'll see you then, and thanks again, everyone.